Sometimes you're going about your day, doing something as simple as folding laundry or waiting in traffic, when suddenly, there they are. A thought, a face, a memory that doesn't ask permission. You don't even want to think about them anymore, but it's like your mind has its own will. You feel a sudden tightness in the chest, as if your soul whispered their name behind your back. And there it is again, the weight of someone who's no longer here, yet somehow still lives inside you. Why does this happen? Why do we keep thinking about someone who's already gone from our lives, not just missing them, obsessing, feeling them, dreaming of them? It's almost like they're still connected to us, and maybe they are. In spiritual traditions across cultures, the idea of energetic cords explains this experience. It's believed that every meaningful emotional interaction we have leaves an invisible thread between souls. Threads woven not with fabric, but with intention, emotion, and memory. These cords can remain intact long after the physical connection has ended. They tie into our energy field and vibrate at the frequency of unresolved emotions: longing, pain, guilt, love. Have you ever felt a sudden wave of sadness and didn't know why, only to remember them moments later? Or had a dream so vivid it shook you awake, even though you hadn't thought of them for weeks? These are not just coincidences. They're often signs that the energetic tie is still active. The soul doesn't recognize blocked on social media. It only knows resonance. It gets even deeper when physical intimacy is involved. Sexual energy, by its nature, is one of the most potent connectors of the human experience. When two people merge not just physically, but emotionally or spiritually, the bond formed is multidimensional. In spiritual teachings, the sacral and heart chakras open in ways that allow deep imprinting to occur. And unless that bond is consciously released or healed, it lingers. It speaks in silence. It pulls you back without touch. But it's not just energy, it's also what's unspoken. Sometimes we hold on because we never got the closure we needed. Sometimes a relationship ends abruptly, and the nervous system doesn't get the memo. It keeps searching, scanning every room you walk into as if it might find them there. Your heart beats a little faster when you hear a song you both loved. Your mind replays old conversations, hoping to rewrite the ending. But the truth is, the body and the soul often grieve in delay. Curiously, certain ancient rituals were designed specifically to cut these cords. Shamans would perform soul retrievals, believing that when we bond deeply, parts of our spirit stay behind with the other person. Modern spiritual healers echo this, suggesting that until we reclaim those parts, we remain energetically fragmented. It's not just a psychological phenomenon, it's a form of soul loss. Yet even knowing this, most of us hesitate to let go completely. Why? Because part of us fears that in releasing them, we lose not just the person, but a piece of ourselves we met through them. They saw a version of us that maybe no one else did, and maybe that part still needs to be seen. When we hold on energetically, we're not only holding on to the person, we're clinging to the moment we felt most alive, most connected, or most loved, even if it hurt. Even if it broke us. And that's the paradox. The mind wants to forget, but the soul often remembers for longer, and in that remembering, a new pattern begins to take shape. One that has more to do with what we project onto them than with who they really were. One where we begin to chase our own shadows, reflected in the face of the one who left. Have you ever stopped to wonder if the person you can't stop thinking about is actually them? Or just an image you built in your mind? Sometimes we don't hold on to a person. We hold on to who we wanted them to be. And this is where the unconscious begins to weave its most powerful illusion. In psychology, this is known as projection, the act of placing your own emotions, unmet needs, and inner wounds onto someone else, like painting over them with your soul's unresolved colors. It's not a conscious choice. It happens silently, automatically. We meet someone, feel a spark, and before we know it, they've become the canvas for everything we're missing. A person may simply show us kindness or presence, but in our inner world, that act becomes magnified. We start seeing them as the healer, the savior, the one who gets us. But often, they're only mirroring back a part of ourselves that we've buried deep. That's why it hurts so much when they leave. Not just because they're gone, but because we feel like a piece of us left with them. Think about it. Maybe you loved how they listened to you when you spoke, but maybe what you really loved was the feeling of finally being heard, something your inner child has been craving for years. Or maybe they made you feel safe in a way you've never felt before. And when that safety vanished, it wasn't just heartbreak. It was emotional abandonment all over again. We often project our inner longing onto people who trigger familiar wounds. That's why it's so intense. That's why it feels fated. It's not necessarily destiny, it's recognition. A part of you recognizes the emotional terrain, the unfinished story, the wound begging to be healed. So your unconscious mind attaches, not because of love, but because of the hope of repair. Curiously, the stronger the projection, the harder it is to let go. Because we're not only grieving the person, we're grieving the idea of what they could have been. The if-only version, the fantasy. And the fantasy, as painful as it is, often feels safer than facing the emptiness they left behind. And here's something even more fascinating. The people we obsess over most are often the ones who stirred something unhealed within us. They didn't create the wound, they simply touched it. And sometimes that touch felt like love, when in truth, it was only recognition. If this resonates with you, if you've seen yourself in these patterns, in these invisible inner movements, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. There's someone else out there who needs to hear this, just like you did. And when you share this kind of truth, you don't just spread information, you help someone remember who they are. Now that we've looked at how the mind creates its own illusions, let's go even deeper. Because what happens when the emotions become addictive? When the pain itself becomes the way we stay connected? There's a strange comfort in pain that comes from love. It's not rational, and yet it's real. Sometimes we don't hold on because of love. We hold on because of the chemical high it once gave us. And when it's gone, we crave it like an addict in withdrawal. Emotional attachment has a biological component that's as powerful as any drug. When we connect with someone deeply, our brains release a cocktail of chemicals: dopamine, the pleasure molecule; oxytocin, the bonding hormone; serotonin, which affects mood and obsession; and endorphins, nature's painkillers. Together, they create the sensation we often mistake for soul-deep love. Now here's where it gets interesting. When that connection is cut off abruptly, the brain doesn't simply move on. It panics. It looks for the next hit. That's why we replay memories. That's why we stalk social media, why we read old messages, why a song can feel like a dagger. The brain is searching for the emotional fix that once made it feel alive. And just like a drug, we can become addicted to the highs and lows of a relationship, the uncertainty, the drama, the intensity. These emotional roller coasters keep our nervous system in a constant state of activation. We begin to mistake intensity for intimacy, and when it's gone, we crash. Think about this. Have you ever found yourself checking your phone impulsively, hoping for a message that never comes? Or telling yourself, just one more time, one more look at their profile, one more memory, one more message you'll never send? That's not weakness. That's addiction, emotional addiction. What makes it even harder is that we often don't realize we're hooked, because the drug we're chasing wears the face of someone we once loved. We think we miss them, but what we're really missing is how we felt when we were with them. That version of ourselves that felt alive, desired, important. And so we chase that ghost, thinking we're chasing a person. Studies have even shown that the brain scans of heartbroken people resemble those of drug addicts in withdrawal. The pain is not imagined. It's neurological, real, tangible. And unless we learn to self-regulate, to sit with the discomfort, we'll look for substitutes. Another person, another distraction, another story. But what if the very pain we're avoiding is the doorway to healing? What if, by understanding our emotional cravings, we begin to untangle not only the addiction, but the very pattern that keeps pulling us back to the same kind of love? Let's explore that next. Because some ties go far beyond the mind or the body. Some bonds may have been written before we even took our first breath. Have you ever met someone and felt as if you'd known them forever? Like there was a familiarity that didn't make sense, a magnetic pull that transcended logic, timing, or circumstance. This is where the soul begins to whisper what the mind cannot explain. Some connections feel destined because they just might be. In many spiritual traditions, there's a concept known as soul contracts, the idea that before we are born, our souls make agreements with other souls to meet, love, hurt, teach, and ultimately evolve together. These aren't just poetic metaphors, they're sacred arrangements meant to activate parts of us that would otherwise remain asleep. That's why certain people wake us up. They challenge us. They mirror back our deepest wounds and our highest potential. They trigger pain not because they are cruel, but because their presence was meant to shake us out of emotional amnesia. They remind us of something ancient, something buried. It's also why the connection can feel unfinished, even when it's clearly over. Because maybe, on a soul level, something was left undone, a lesson half learned, a wound half healed. And so we feel haunted, not just by their absence, but by the silence of what was never fully expressed or understood. Imagine this. Someone enters your life, stays for a few months, and then disappears. But the emotional echo of that brief time lingers for years. Rationally, it doesn't add up, but energetically it does. That's because time doesn't measure the depth of a soul agreement. One conversation can change your life more than a decade-long relationship ever did. These connections can also be karmic, not as punishment, but as balance. We may be called to meet someone again in this lifetime, to resolve what was left open in another. Sometimes love comes to heal. Other times, it comes to break us. Only so we can be rebuilt with deeper awareness. The pain of separation in these cases can feel unbearable because it's not just physical loss, it's spiritual unraveling. The soul recognizes that something sacred has passed. And often we don't mourn the person, but the transformation they brought and the version of us they helped awaken. But here's the paradox. Even the most painful soul contracts are sacred. Their purpose is not permanence, it's evolution. Their mission is to ignite something that only their presence could spark. And when that mission is complete, even if it ends in heartbreak, the contract dissolves. Yet even knowing that, how do we move forward? How do we honor the connection without clinging to it? How do we finally release the tie without denying its meaning? Letting go isn't forgetting. It's not erasing the memories, denying the connection, or pretending it never mattered. Letting go is an act of liberation, not just from the other person, but from the version of yourself that stayed trapped in that chapter for too long. When we remain emotionally and energetically tied to someone, we carry their echo into every room we enter, every decision we make, every new person we meet. It's as if a piece of us is still sitting at the table of a conversation that ended years ago, waiting for an answer that will never come. But here's the truth no one likes to say out loud. Closure doesn't always come from them. It comes from you. Healing starts with recognizing that pain is not always a sign of love. Sometimes it's a sign of resistance, a part of you that doesn't want to accept that the story ended differently than you hoped. And that's okay. Mourning the idea of what could have been is a sacred part of the process. But staying there, replaying, analyzing, hoping, that's not grief, that's self-abandonment. Rituals can be powerful allies in the process of release. Writing a letter you'll never send, speaking their name in a quiet room, thanking them for what they gave and what they couldn't, visualizing a cord being gently cut between you, not out of anger, but from a place of love that no longer needs to hold on. These are not just symbolic gestures. They're signals to your subconscious that the cycle is ready to close. One of the most powerful tools in this process is forgiveness. Not for them, but for yourself. For the times you stayed too long. For the way you made yourself small just to keep them close. For the belief that you weren't enough unless they chose you. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's remembering without pain. It's reclaiming your story from the hands of someone who was never meant to write the ending. And then, slowly, the energy begins to shift. You start noticing that thinking about them no longer burns, that the places you once avoided feel neutral, that the music you couldn't bear to hear now makes you smile softly instead of ache. These small signs are sacred. They're proof that you're returning to yourself. Because in the end, healing is not about erasing love. It's about expanding beyond it. It's about becoming the person that version of you never had the chance to become while clinging to the past. And once you begin to embody that, something magical happens. The obsession fades, the loop ends, and in its place something else emerges, not silence, but space. Space for something new, something real, something you don't have to chase to keep.